Welcome to the podcast, Writing What I Like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar with me, Dr. Venus Evans Winters, also known as Dr. V. In this podcast series, I blend the worlds of all of my worlds of education, mental health, and writing. So, in this particular episode and this field note, I'm actually responding to a few questions that I've had about writing specifically. So about writing. And recently I've been getting a lot of questions from graduate students who are asking me, so how do you know what you want to research or what you want to write? And usually that's how they stumble through the question. Like, how do I know what I want to write? So these are for students who are in a particular writing class, a research class, or they're in a class, but they have to write a paper, or they have to conduct a research study. But I also get this question from people who are not in colleges and universities. So these are just everyday people who want to write their story. So say in the back of their mind, they have an experience that they want to share with the world, or it may be someone who's a professional practitioner, meaning that they serve other people. So they want to write books to help other people, like self-help books, or it's people who want to write fictions or even non-fictions, but they are not professional writers. So they want to know, well, how do you write? Like, when do you write? What is your motivation? And so I have 4 questions that I do want to answer. So again, how do you know what to write? I'll start there. How do you know what to write? And when do you write? And another question, what is your motivation for writing? That's a question I get all the time. And what's the purpose of writing? That's the question I get too. So what's the purpose of writing? Especially for those of us who come from an oral tradition. So the first thing I'll state unequivocally, I'm just going to state it like for real. When I'm not writing, I'm writing or teaching about writing. So that's something that tells you a lot about how I feel about writing. When I'm not thinking about writing, I'm writing or I'm teaching about writing. So I'll come from that frame of reference. So I'm not talking about the technical side of writing, or in this podcast, I'm not even going to talk about publishing. I have been successful at publishing, yes, academic books, as well as academic journal articles and online pieces. So I have been somewhat successful at writing, or some people would say very successful at writing and publishing, but I don't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about the writing process itself and just getting started. So I'll start here. For the most part, I write about topics and issues that most inspire me. So issues that inspire me the most. I write about the research and writing process itself, topics related to the lifestyles and cultures of Black youth and their families, their communities, and schools. I write about the education system and the education of Black girls and women. I also write about my travels to, various continents or different countries, especially serving in Africa, in different parts of Africa. And I also write about my own life experiences as a Black woman, as a professor, as a mother, and as a community worker. And so I write about pretty much everything. And we'll talk about where I write and my outlets for writing. My outlets can be anything from a piece of napkin. I might write on a piece of napkin. I write on Post-it notes. I write in journals. I write on my computer. I write in social media. So I write all the time, not just for professional return. When do I write? Well, I write all the time, and that's important. So you're going to hear me saying this throughout this podcast. I write all the time. I even wrote this podcast. I write on my blog, and I microblog across all my social media sites: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I think in words. I write academic book length manuscripts, book chapters for other people's books, and I write articles for academic journals. Now, of course, I also write presentations for conferences and keynotes and lectures that I'm giving. I also write my course assignments. I also write my course syllabi. And in my spare time, I even write online articles. And every night and morning, most days, I write in my journal. I own a writing journal, I own a research journal, and I own a personal journal. I even own a business journal. So that's like where I keep data related to my business, numbers, ideas, concepts, growth plans, etc. So I know this sounds redundant, but I just want the message to get across that I write all the time. And anybody who's a writer will tell you that if they're not writing, more than likely they're thinking about writing. It's our creative outlet. So someone who dances, for example, who's a professional dancer, they're always thinking about dancing, or they think in dance moves, choreography. People who are painters, they may think about colors all the time, or they think about their palettes, they think about their next project. So if you want to be a writer, message, you have to write, and write all the time. And you'll know if it's your calling or passion, because if you're not actually doing it, you're thinking about it. As far as what is my motivation for writing? That's actually a good question. What is my motivation for writing? My hope is that someone would hear our freedom cries. So I do tie writing to other struggles, freedom struggles, whether it's racial, gender, class, just writing. I don't even know how to explain. My motivation is that someone will actually hear our cry, so to speak, that someone will learn about our pain, our joys, our rich culture. I know that our stories, that Black people's stories, women and girls' stories, the poor and working class people's stories, will be etched in the historical record. So my motivation, or my goal, or my objective for writing is that our stories will be told and etched, or heard. Our stories will be heard and etched in the historical record. If someone doesn't read our stories today, I guarantee you they will read about it one day. So even if they don't hear our stories today, or hear your story today, they will hear about it someday. So for example, approximately 15 to 20 years ago, I started to study Black women's history by looking up slave narratives. What enslaved African woman thought that her story would be heard and read in the 1990s or early 2000s by a Black girl from the South Side of Chicago? So you never know when your story is going to be heard. And who knew that story would one day be integrated and merged and meshed with a Black girl from the South Side of Chicago's stories in academic life and persona. That's amazing. So that's my motivation for writing, so that our stories can be heard and that it can have a political objective. I also write to liberate my mind, to free my thoughts, and to see my ideas in writing. I'm one of those people that I think about stuff a lot, or I hear other people's ideas. By putting it on paper, it makes it tangible. That sounds crazy, right? Writing is about symbols that we give meaning to, but for me, it's tangible. I could feel words. I can see words. I can damn near smell words. If you have the right journal and the correct writing utensil, you can smell words. But anyway, I am clearly a visual person, even though I don't draw or paint. Writing to me is an art. Writing is a science, but it's also an art. And I'm not talking about the technicalities of writing today, but I just want to talk about the process of writing. Why do we write? What is the motivation? So I've already answered, how do you know what to write? When do you write? And I just responded to, what is your motivation for writing? So now, lastly, another question I'm asked is, what's the purpose of writing? So what is the purpose of writing? For me, the purpose of writing serves many purposes. Most importantly, though, I write to process or to critically think about something that I've read, especially like more higher order or difficult to comprehend reading. So if something is like above my learning curve, I need to write about it. I need to think about it in words, right? That's my manipulation of an idea. I write about it. So let's say we're talking about epistemology or ontology, right? Those crazy words. Or if I want to try to process some new political or economic idea, I just write about it in my own words to make sense of it. Usually these are pieces that my brain wants to connect other readings or other social phenomenon to. So it may be something that's totally out of my field or something out of my area of thought, and I just need to write it down because I see something significant. So let's say it's on, I don't know, the environment. And so I'll take something, and this is an actual piece that I wrote on Detroit and poisoning water. So of course I'm interested in the health and well-being of people, right? Of people, especially young people. And so I was reading about environmental racism and the poisoning of water, and I'm like, oh, how does this affect education? And how does this affect people's mental health? And so I had to write down everything about water and environmental racism and lead poisoning. And then I connected those ideas to something I definitely know: education, mental health, behavior, psychology, and how we control populations, and eugenics. And I just put it all together. And so again, connecting these ideas through writing, or various social phenomenon through writing. Unfortunately, it's difficult to have to contemplate such readings orally. So sometimes, let's say they're talking about lead poisoning. Of course, I can have that conversation with other people. It's been like a group setting, or I could talk about it on the phone. But I could tell you now, most of the people I know, like say if it's my best friends or my sister, they don't want to hear about, Venus talking about lead poisoning again. Venus talking about environmental racism, right? Because we're oral people. That's our instinct to talk about it. But in this case, they like, here we go again. Here's Venus at it again about racism. So I write it. I just write it down and think about it. And then I use writing as my outlet. Also, it's difficult sometimes to have conversations orally because of social isolation, or most academic writing is also not accessible, or it's full of jargon, or it's not of interest to everyday people. So even if I'm talking about, say, eugenics or some other, let's say we're talking about neoliberalism in education and how white capitalists are taking over majority black communities and neighborhoods and closing down our schools. Well, our people know about that, or the people whom I speak with know about that. But what's happening is everyday people do not know the jargon of sociology, the jargon of economics, the jargon of political science. So it's my job to be a medium between my community and this in academic jargon. So I'm a translator. I'm a cultural worker. I am a cultural facilitator of knowledge, so to speak. Yeah, I just made that up. A cultural facilitator of knowledge. I like the way that sounds. That might need to be another podcast. But anyway, fortunately, by writing, I can break down complicated information for everyday people, for my people, which is actually another reason that I write. So I write also to break down complicated information so that I can translate it, across communities. Thirdly, the purpose of writing for me is as a successful author, I say successful, and as a leisure writer, I also know for sure that writing and research are a skill. Let me state that again. Writing and research are a skill. Therefore, the more you write, the more you develop the skill of writing and become good at it. The more you write, the more you develop the skill of writing and become good at it. That's just like athletes. I was a cross-country runner and a track runner, and I'm a pretend runner now. But the more you stretch, the easier it becomes for your muscles to stretch out, even when you're not trying, right? Or the longer you run, even if it's just a foot longer, an inch longer, a minute longer. Eventually you add more distance, and the easier it is to run. If you're weightlifting, hey, it might be 10, it might be 3 sets of 10 today, but then some other day it might be heavy lifting again at 3 sets or 4 sets. Hopefully you won't go to more than that. But anyway, so it becomes a habit. And writing as a habit not only can help you become better at writing, but it also helps you become more reflective. It helps you become a more reflective person, interpersonal, have introspection. And it also can help you develop content. Sometimes when you're just writing, especially freehand, that's when you get the best ideas. You're working that writer's muscle. And when you work that writer's muscle, you see the athletic connection again? When you're working that writer's muscles, you're more likely to produce better outcomes, which is in this case generating ideas. So in closing and in reflection, the best advice that I can give to students or anyone who wants to become a better writer or someone who wants to publish is to write more. Simply write more. Write about something you read. Write about a topic you care about, or write about your feelings. This also have that mental health component, because remember, in this podcast series, I'm combining all of my worlds. I'm combining the world of education, the world of psychology, the world of therapy, the world of health, nutrition, and fitness. So the more that you write, you actually also begin to feel better mentally, and you can help other people feel better mentally, as well as help contribute to a better overall social state for people. Whatever you do, just write. So when you have to write for a purpose, like for a speech or article. So when you have to write for a purpose, like if you need to write a speech or article, or you need to work with a particular audience, if you write daily, if you can't write daily, write weekly. Writing will come easier for you when it's time to do something more purposefully, like write for an audience. If you're writing daily, it's actually helping your brain. So then when you do have to do something that has a time limit or a time frame on it, such as you have a speech or a keynote or an article due or a class assignment, it's just easier for your brain to generate information or ideas on paper or on computer. It will be like second nature, or you may if you already have content ready, simply just because you've been writing all along, it will be easier for you to organize that content in writing. So write daily, write weekly, write as much as possible. So anyway, if you have any more questions about my writing process, you can tweet me at Dr. V. Evans Winters, or, of course, you can visit my Facebook page at Dr. Venus Evans Winters, or you can sign up for my newsletter at drvenusevanswinters.com. But either way, write for yourself, for your own mental health. Write for others. Maybe someone will find something in your story that is liberating and empowering. So write for that purpose. Or if one day you have to write because you have that class assignment, or if you really do want that book project to come into fruition, just start getting into the habit of writing now. In the meantime, this is the podcast, Writing What I Like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and you can download all the episodes and like me on Facebook, and also visit me on Twitter and online. Thank you for listening to Writing What I Like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar.